First, I would like to introduce Mr. Glenn Rees, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Alzheimer's Australia. And over the 10 years that he's held that position, he's been making dementia a health priority in that country. So he's going to talk to us about the dementia strategy in Australia. You're very welcome.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the invitation, and to Susan, Carl and Caroline Forsyth in particular for making me so welcome and spoiling me and ensuring that everything goes so well. I'm particularly grateful too because Australia is rather a long way from all of you, and it's nice to have the opportunity of sharing what we're doing and to learn a little bit about what's happening in Europe. I've taken the opportunity to reflect on my experience over the last 30 years in aged care and dementia. I was privileged in 1985 to head up a review of nursing homes and hostels for the then Minister of Community Services in Australia. And our challenge then was exactly the one that was in the document that was launched today. And that was to reverse the balance of residential care with community care and to set a strategy for doing that over the following 10 to 15 years. And we were fortunate in that all our recommendations from that review were accepted, and although we have a 3-year election cycle in Australia, which is abominably short, the government actually adopted an 8-year stage strategy to implementing the various changes, which included more community care, assessment teams, standards, complaints, and a totally revised funding system. In the middle 80s, when we did that review, there was very limited understanding of dementia, and the best we could do at that stage in terms of the review I did then was to have what we called innovative dementia grants for low residential care facilities to adopt better design and care for people with dementia. Today, we've seen enormous changes in Australia, but I will still be arguing in what I say to you that we still need a revolution in Australia in terms of where we need to take policy for people with dementia. And why do I say that? I say it for 2 reasons. Firstly, because negative social attitudes still endure, negative stereotyping, loss of rights, stigma, social isolation. And secondly, I say it for a reason that may be peculiar to Australia, but it's a very powerful one for us. And that is really that the Australian health system has not embraced dementia as a chronic disease. It still treats it as something to be palliated and something that's a responsibility of the aged care system. So if I write to the Minister about primary care, it'll be flicked past to the aged care division at the speed of light, never to see the medical fraternity focus on the issue. I actually think those 2 issues are linked. If you can't do away with stigma, if you can't get a sense of hope, and if the health system isn't treating you seriously, how do you get a more positive approach to care of people with dementia? So in what I say to you, I really want to address 3 things: the Australian experience, a new paradigm that we're looking at, empowering consumers, and above all, I think my primary message is that national policy is important, but how you communicate it is much more important still, and that's really where we're at. Before I get too earnest with policy, I just want to show you this little slide, which shows where we've come from in Alzheimer's Australia. The cuddly little logo up the left, the vacant figure, presumably a person with dementia, a cuddle from a carer. That was the logo during the 1990s. A slightly sharper image in 2005, and recognizing that people live with dementia, and that is an important thing to understand. And the logo that we introduced on the 13th of October, our new logo, our new brand, our new strategy, Fight Alzheimer's, Save Australia. A much more aggressive, a much more assertive approach to getting the message across, and a different web address, fightdementia.org.au. So let me turn to the Australian experience. In the middle of the 2004 election in October, John Howard, the then Prime Minister, said that they would make as one of their major election commitments a dementia initiative with $320 million extra over 5 years. And we could track that back to a report that we released in 2003 called The Dementia Epidemic, Economic and Social Impact, Solutions for Australia. The $320 million over 5 years has actually become $180 million per year today. I don't like figures, and I'm not going to give you too many, but I don't believe that plans without money are a great deal of use, and I think it's important for you to know that the money is still there in Australia, even though I'll come on to some not good news in a moment. From a consumer perspective, the highlights of the Dementia Initiative have been the improved access to specialist dementia services, the increased community engagement through community grants and sector development grants and community education activities, much needed increases in dementia care funding through 3 dementia collaborative research centres, which have attracted younger researchers and increased our research capacity, and hopefully over time will improve the take-up of dementia by the National Health and Medical Research Council. Dementia behaviour management advisory services to help carers in the community and to help residential care and community care workers understand better how you deal with behaviours and psychosocial approaches. And then last of all, access to support for people with dementia and their family carers through targeted resources and support through my own organisation. The initiative was evaluated at the end of the 5 years independently by the government, and it cost about $1 million. The initiative was found to be effective, but it was found to be inadequate in a couple of key areas. One of those was that primary care and early diagnosis hadn't been adequately dealt with. The other one was that there was no adequate communication strategy to explain to the wider community what it was that people were trying to achieve. After all of that, the evaluation and positive results, in the 2011 budget, the initiative was terminated. I hasten to add that the funding wasn't terminated, but the department in its wisdom, or ministers in their wisdom, changed the structure of the programs in the department, and the Dementia Initiative was just an inconvenience in terms of their new bureaucratic structure. So we have the money, but we don't have what we thought was a platform for the future to build new priorities, particularly around the health area. It shattered our confidence, but like all good news, bad news, you can turn bad news to your advantage, and for us it was a wake-up call. It was a wake-up call that what we thought was a commitment forever by a government interested in dementia wasn't that at all, even though the money was there. So, what should our new paradigm be in the development of dementia policy in Australia? Because what I've explained to you briefly in terms of the Dementia Initiative is really founded around our aged care system. More training for aged care workers, high care community packages worth about $47,000 a year for those who can access them, and there's still only 6,000 of those across Australia. But for some people they do provide the ability to stay at home much longer. Nearly everything in the initiative was related to aged care. So, in talking about dementia and national policy now in Australia, we emphasise health policy to a much greater degree. We emphasise the extra costs of dementia care, the need for flexible respite care, the need to better address the severe behaviours involved with psychological symptoms of dementia and younger onset dementia. What we're trying to point out to people is that just improving mainstream aged care in Australia won't get us to where we want to be. There's an interesting question halfway through the report, which I had a chance to read on the plane over here, which is about, can mainstream services in aged care cope adequately with dementia, or do you need special services? I think for all the reasons that I've got on this slide, you need special services, and you continually need to remind the political and the administrative level that simply having a good aged care system won't get you to where you want to be. So our new framework, which you'll find in this Fight Dementia campaign document, which is on our campaign Fight Dementia website, and I've got a few copies here if people want it at the end of the session to give away, really says to ministers and the broader community something very simple. We know what we want. It's what you've done for cancer. It's what you've done for heart. It's what you've done for diabetes. Now please do it for dementia. And really all we want is a public health framework that's based around awareness, timely diagnosis, support and care, acute care, preventative health, and research. So our mantra continually in Australia is, please do for us what you've done for other chronic diseases, and don't just regard us as an aged care issue. So turning to awareness and understanding just briefly, there's a very limited awareness in Australia of dementia. Few people understand it beyond memory loss. Few understand it affects younger people. Few understand that it's the third largest cause of death in Australia. And few understand that it develops years before diagnosis. And even fewer understand that by the time you have clinical symptoms, much of the damage is done. So the research effort ought to be much further back in the food chain. So we've done surveys, as I guess you have in Ireland, to find out what people think about dementia. And at least in the Australian context, it's only just behind cancer in terms of fear, if that's a motivator in life. Legal rights, I think in Australia we've probably been a bit behind the UK in thinking about these issues, but certainly we do want to do a lot more work around ethical decision-making areas, evaluating current law. We're doing a lot of work around end-of-life, advanced care directives. We've put out a publication on euthanasia, not to give an argument in favour or against, but simply to help consumers and people with dementia understand the arguments for and against, what's happening overseas, so that we can better take part in the public debate, which I think is inevitable in Australia in the next 2 or 3 years. Timely diagnosis. I guess you all know about the report that ADI released not long ago on World Alzheimer's Day last year. Showed great under-recognition of dementia. 20 to 50% of people living with dementia are recognised in primary care across the world. In Australia, we did our own work, and we showed that from the time of first recognition of symptoms to diagnosis took on average 3.1 years. And in the Australian context, it's a positive now for us that the Minister, in many of his speeches, talks about those years as lost years. Lost years for planning, less trauma, less uncertainty, enabling individuals to empower themselves in thinking about how to handle their dementia. Support and care. We have a review of the reform of aged care from our Productivity Commission in Australia. It's a very respected body, despite being consisting of economists. And it's produced a report that's a really good read for the connoisseurs of aged care. It's called Caring for Older Australians. It runs to 750 pages, but there's a very good executive summary. The principal elements of the reforms I've listed here, and obviously I've got to be brief, but For me, as somebody involved intimately in aged care reforms in the 1980s, it's the best opportunity we've had for 25 years to take what we started in 1985 through to its natural conclusion. And the natural conclusion is to have entitlement to services based on assessed need and move away from the system that we have in Australia, which is based on rationing. Secondly, to increase further the access to community care by removing the link between care and accommodation and expanding still further community care packages. Thirdly, to improve access to information and assessment through a gateway designed to bring together information and assessment to enable consumers to know where they can go more easily to get information and services. Really linking very much with something that's come up this morning, which is the importance of case management and linked workers, and trying to refine that concept and making sense of it within our own bureaucratic structures. Fourthly, something I worship each day, which is a commitment to consumer-directed models of care to better meet consumer needs through flexible services. Fifthly, changes to user services, user pay system, to make the system more sustainable. And even though the changes are quite radical, so far those haven't been political. It seems that consumers in Australia actually want quality services and will pay for that, providing they know that's what they're going to get. And lastly, a big emphasis on improvement to end-of-life services, advanced care planning and palliative care. So quite a menu. The government are committed to acting on this report in the 2012 or 2013 budget. We're excited about the report and we support its architecture, except it has the weakness that I pointed out to you before. The Productivity Commission assume that because they've designed a lovely aged care system, it's going to be a lovely system for people with dementia. And I don't think it will be for a number of reasons. It won't be unless government recognises up front extra funding for dementia care. It won't meet the bill unless respite care is more flexible and better resourced. And I might say in an Australian context that of all the services that carers of people with dementia say they want, respite care is by far the most prominent. And on any statistic you look at in Australia, carers of people with dementia seek respite care more than any other body of carers. Culturally appropriate care for dementia, as an organisation, we have a very big commitment to Indigenous people, people from ethnic backgrounds and the homeless. So again, we think you need more than entitlement in those areas because entitlement programs often favour the middle classes and the better off. Support for younger onset dementia. There's a big risk in Australia of those people falling between the aged care system and the disability system, and we really have to make sure that there's a home for those people in our funding arrangements. And lastly, we need much better coordination between the aged care and mental health systems for those with severe psychiatric issues. So, I won't be too evangelical about this because I suspect you're all converted anyway. We've been pressing for consumer-directed care in Australia for nearly 12 years. The government have now acted on it and we've got our first consumer-directed community care packages in Australia and respite care packages. We're way behind where disabilities are in Australia and way behind other countries in Europe. But in our own pragmatic way, we'll probably get there in the end, and the Productivity Commission have certainly helped us along the way. The one area where I think consumer-directed care is most important for us is respite care. It's where we need flexibility most. The Productivity Commission have recommended vouchers or cash experiments in respite care and evaluating that. I think that's one of the most important things from a dementia point of view in the report. I think it's really exciting. For the most part, I think the current generation of carers and people with dementia in Australia are actually happy with budget holdings rather than vouchers and cash. They don't want to be employers. but they do want to have a say in what the services are that they get, where they get them, who delivers them, and so on. So, having been a bit negative perhaps about the things that aren't there in the Productivity Commission's report, we do have now a Minister for Mental Health and Ageing who's a member of Cabinet in his own right. The last time that happened was 1985, when we had our own Minister in Cabinet to argue our corner. I think it's immensely important that ageing and disabilities and community services more generally have a powerful voice in Cabinet. And our Minister currently has said that aged care reform that does not have a dementia response at its heart will not be successful. So we've written that down and we remind him daily that that's what he's promised. Acute care, I won't repeat some of the things that have been said. We haven't focused on acute care as much as we should have done. We know in Australia that 54% of people in hospitals are over the age of 55. It's probable that many of those people will have some sort of cognitive impairment. We believe that in some hospitals the level of cognitive impairment could be as high as 40% of patients, even though dementia will probably only be a primary diagnosis for about 7%. Those issues are obviously going to become much more significant over the next little while. We're doing an economic report of the kind that the UK Alzheimer Society did 4 or 5 years ago that looks at the economic impact of dementia on hospitals, some of the barriers to treating people with dementia better, and looking at some of the strategies worldwide that we can embrace to do better, including using the new e-health systems we've got in Australia. Consumers are very keen on something called a cognitive impairment symbol, which sometimes amazes people that consumers can be interested in something that doesn't sound at all ethical. But essentially what they want in Australia is a symbol that you could put on the walls of banks, could put on the walls of Centrelink, which would signify that everybody who was a member of the staff of that organisation was trained to communicate with the person with dementia or cognitive impairment. So it would give the person with cognitive impairment confidence to go in there and ask their questions or ask for staff who could really help them. It's an idea that's been around for 4 or 5 years, and I'm still seeking the right break to get it up. Preventative health. Professor Kenny's been much more informed on that than I could be, so I won't touch on that. What I will say is this, that we've looked at the NIH report. We've reached the view that there's enough evidence to go out and be positive about risk reduction and exercise. We believe it does no harm and can only do good. We know that less than 50% of Australians know anything about the possibilities of risk reduction and dementia. That of those that do know, very few in fact know that cardiovascular diseases are the most important component. So we put a lot of time and energy into risk reduction, and what we want more than anything is for the government to move beyond the mantra of obesity, alcohol and smoking to saying physical health and brain health are linked. So if you're doing something about smoking, if you're doing something about obesity, if you're doing something about diabetes, if you're doing something about alcohol, and you've got a preventative program in government, make the link to dementia and tell people that they may also possibly be helping themselves in that way as well. Research. We spend a miserable $20 million a year on research in Australia through the National Health and Medical Research Council. That compares with the other chronic diseases you see on the slide. Obviously significantly less than any other chronic disease area. On any reasonable benchmark of prevalence, cost, disability, dementia ought to be up there with those other conditions. We spend, in fact, probably less than, we do spend less than 0.5% of the cost of the direct cost of dementia on research. And for a country which already has 270,000 people with dementia and will have 1 million by the middle of this century, that's a really pretty pathetic effort. So where are we now? We've got a Minister for Ageing in Cabinet, and what I wanted to spend some time on, but I seem to be running out of time, was to say that for me, I think you know, we know what we need to do. I think the thing that's changing for us is being much more assertive and to deliver with attitude and considerably more aggression to government and to the opposition the dementia message. And when I think back to when I arrived in this job in 2000, it seems to me we almost apologised for the fact that we were bringing a problem forward. And that might be the centuries of stigma, it might be other things. But in Australia now, maybe it's our competitive, nasty instinct when we beat you all up at sport and other things. But we actually want to win. We actually want to fight dementia. And the disappointment we had in the budget focused our minds wonderfully. So in the middle of this year, we introduced our dementia strategy, our Fight Dementia campaign, which I've got some copies of here, and we've got a campaign website. And what we did really was to bring together two strategies. We'd been working for 18 months with Interbrand, a multinational company that specializes in that area, who was prepared to do a lot of pro bono work for us, to develop a strategy. And they asked us at the outset, what do you want to do? You know, what do you really want to achieve? And we said the usual things, including, you know, being a top 10 charity and other things. And I made the observation that I wanted a bloody great explosion. That after all the investment in intellectual capital that we have and the wonderful evidence base, we want to get it out there. We want to sell it. So we've done two things that came together on the 13th of October, which was to march on Parliament House. So we got carers and people with dementia across Australia to march on Parliament House. The Minister met us. Our new President, who's an icon in Australia, a legend in her own right, who was the first female editor of a major national paper, editor of the Women's Weekly, on all the anchor shows on morning television, gets the word Alzheimer's into every corner of the media every day. She led the march, and we're on our way. So we launched our brand on that day, Fight Alzheimer's, Save Australia. And the play on the words is quite important. It gives us so much flexibility. So Fight Alzheimer's, Save Australia. Understand Alzheimer's, Educate Australia. Stop Alzheimer's, Go Australia. And we've got lots of these permutations of words that we build around to get corporate interest, to get community interest, to play messages in the particular target audiences that we want to play to. So, the other things that we're doing for the first time, we should have done it years ago, I guess, much more active use of social media, Facebook, YouTube. The President I've mentioned, we had an Advent calendar at Christmas on our website with people with dementia telling their stories. We had another one on New Year's Day involving carers giving their wishes for the New Year's. And on the 14th of February, which for the less romantic among you is Valentine's Day, we're going to send hearts to the Prime Minister, the Treasurer, the Finance Minister, and opposition spokesperson saying, pop the question on dementia. So we're trying to bring humour, aggression, passion and commitment to an issue which you can take too seriously. We, like you, have got plans coming out of our ears in Australia going back to 1990. And I think we have to change gear. And we're changing gear now. So you might well ask me, well, Glenn, that's all wonderful, but, you know, you got your results yet? No. The budget has yet to come and I've yet to get more money. But I can tell you that the march attracted an audience of 26 million. We had every TV channel out, we had every radio station out, we had all the major nationals out, and the total of audience, adding it all up, all over the place, was 26 million. The advertising equivalent of that was a multiple of 5 or 6 times the cost of the campaign. And more than that, our consumers, our people with dementia and our carers are saying to us, thank God we're doing something. So we may fail, but at least they want to try. So look, I think I'd better stop there before I get murdered. That's our lovely president. That's our Christmas wishes. We've got 35 federal members and senators now as champions, and that's all happened in 3 months. And that's 35 out of 240. So we've got a way to go, but we'll get there. 26 million, I've told you about that. So look, Australia isn't a bad place to grow old in. And in fact, if you have dementia, Australia's not bad. Netherlands or maybe some other places, you know, rival us a bit. But we don't have a bad system. We can do a whole lot better, which is the message. And what I'm really saying to you is that I think the element that we have now that we've lacked in the past is passion and commitment. And a lot of younger people working for us are making a hell of a difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Glenn Rees. That was such food for thought. I think there's some parallels in that dementia remains very much hidden here within our care system, and that was very evident to us when we were doing the research and just even trying to get the data. You know, there was just this invisibility, and people with dementia are hidden. But the menu of reforms that Glenn has given us, I think, are really important messages, particularly trying to make dementia a public health issue, you know, that it needs to be treated as not just within aged care, but as a chronic disease management approach to it. So all of those messages, but particularly the last point about the passion and the commitment that's needed. And I mean, we were just overwhelmed by the interest in the conference today, and I think that really tells us an awful lot about the interest and the passion that there is in Ireland about moving this on to the next stage. So I suppose this is a chance to build on that in the future. But we do have time for 1 or 2 questions before our next speaker, if anybody would like to ask a question. Janet?
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I was wondering, what does it take to become a parliamentary, a champion in Parliament? What are the criteria for that?
Nothing very much, because we don't want to frighten them. Really all they have to do is to say, find some words. We have their picture up there, so it's just some words which would say something like, this is a really important issue, I support it, we need better support in the community for carers. It could be as simple as that. Or it could be, you know, my father had dementia, if they want to do that. And I know from family experience that the issues here are really important across the community. See, we're only really looking for 3 or 4 sentences. We don't ask them for money. What we're really trying to do politically is this. We want people in the caucus room of the Labour Party or the backbench meetings of the coalition. We want these people to tell the stories of the people that have spoken to them in the community. And that takes time. But we're finding that. And it's intangible, but I think I can say after 3 months of doing this that there's a difference. We saw the Prime Minister before Christmas. We've never seen the Prime Minister before. And her first words to myself and the President were, what's this Fight Dementia campaign about? I mean, it was partly joking, obviously somebody had briefed her, but you know, it gave us a common element of something to talk about. So that's what it's about.
Was your PR company very instrumental in coming up with these strategies, your marketing, the people that you've done?
Yes, the march was my idea, I guess. In June, I was on a TV programme. They said, what are you going to do next? So I said, oh, we'll march on Parliament House. And my staff said, well, you haven't told us about that. So, you know, I said to Morris's people yesterday that I would love to say that everything we've done is carefully planned. But the way the Fight Dementia campaign came together with the branding and marketing was brilliant and fortuitous. I mean, it had never occurred to me really until about September that those 2 things coming together was just fantastic for us. And one had taken 18 months to deliver, the other one had only started 2 or 3 months before. So I think you have to be slightly buccaneering and entrepreneurial in all of this, and you can plan to a certain degree, but at the end of it all, you take the chances when you can get them, when you can see the Prime Minister, when you can do this, when you can do that.
Any other questions? maybe you could just say who you are.
My name is Ursula Collins. I'm with the Alzheimer Society of Ireland, and I had the pleasure of speaking to Glenn yesterday when he came to our national offices. I wonder, Glenn, if you could touch on your communication strategy in relation to end-of-life planning, advanced care directives, etc., that you briefed us yesterday.
Well, just briefly, because I don't want to be unfair to my good mate Alistair. We've produced 2 publications on end-of-life. One looks at end-of-life issues within the current law. The other one looks at end-of-life within the context of euthanasia and other things. We have some wonderful academics in Australia, Professor Colin Cartwright, who some of you may know, and others, who, at no expense to us, wander around Australia doing seminars on advanced care directives and other things. And we've managed to get some money from the Bupa Foundation in Australia to wheel out a whole load of more seminars on those issues in the next little while. We're also doing some work around palliative care. We had Julian Hughes out on a public lecture tour, which raised our game tremendously in terms of understanding the ethics that lie behind some of those issues. Something that I struggle with, and maybe some of you know the answer, is whether we actually should talk about palliative care in the context of dementia, or whether dementia care is dementia care and it starts at the moment of diagnosis and it has to go over a period of years, because the concept of palliative care is very much linked to the last few weeks of life, whereas with dementia you're really thinking about cognitive impairment and a journey and expression of wishes years before. So I think the issues there are very different, and we're writing a publication at the moment which is really about, do we need a new concept for palliation in dementia care, and if so, what does it look like? And I think Morris and some of his people are doing something a bit similar. So those are the sorts of things we're thinking about.
Thank you very much.